In this episode of Ricky remembers comics, and more importantly, when comics exploded in the early 90s to the mid 90s in the Philippines. I'm here right now at Nuclear Comics in Laguna Hills with the owner and proprietor, Mr. Kenny Jacobs. Say hi to everyone, Kenny.
Hello.
How's it going, man? So apparently, today is supposed to be National Comic Day, but more importantly, today is New Comics Day. Every Wednesday is New Comics Day, right, Kenny?
Every single Wednesday.
So that's why today's episode is about remembering comics, and as I said, when it exploded in the Philippines in the early 90s to the mid 90s. So, Kenny, back in the day in the Philippines, we only had two comic book stores that we could go to. There was Philbar's Comics and also Comic Quest. That's where we would go to for our comics. And for me, it started out with the Infinity Gauntlet. Can you remember that? I know the
Yeah.
movie that this whole Marvel thing is all about the Infinity Gauntlet, but that was where it started for us in the early 90s. So they came out with that series. How many was that, 5 or 6? Six comic books with the Infinity Gauntlet. And then also right around the time was when the Extinction Agenda happened, when X-Men had this crossover with the other titles. Remember, there was, I think it started with X-Men 281. I remember that was the first comic book that I ever bought. It was drawn by Whilce Portacio. I remember it vividly because it was signed by Whilce Portacio, a Filipino artist, and that was the first X-Men comic that I bought. But then it also had that crossover with X-Force and Excalibur and X-Factor.
Isn't 281 first Bishop?
That was also the first appearance of Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop.
You're right. That was right around the time that Bishop came out, and Bishop was created by Whilce Portacio, right?
Drawn by him.
Drawn by him.
I don't remember who the writer was.
So there you go. So that's how I remember comics back then, and that's when everything happened for comics in the Philippines. So as I said earlier, we had two places where we could get comic books in Manila. There was Philbar's, and there was Comic Quest. Philbar's, I think, had 3 stores in the city. They had one in Cubao, in New York, Cubao. One in Green Hills in Vera Mall under the escalator. I'm sure a lot of you remember that. And also they had a store which opened when I was in high school already. They opened a store in Robinson's Galleria. And then Comic Quest had 2 stores back then. They had one in Green Hills as well in the Shopsville building. And they also had one in Mega Mall, in SM Mega Mall. But that was later on. Again, when I was also in high school. When Philbar's opened in Robinson's Galleria, Comic Quest opened in SM Mega Mall. So we only had those 2 places where we could get comic books back in the day. Can you imagine that? Can you? We had 2 comic book stores that we could buy comics from. Imagine all of LA and you only have 2 comic book shops.
It's almost how bad LA is right now.
So
It kind of seems normal.
As I said, we're doing something different here in Ricky Remembers today, wherein we have a guest. We're here in Nuclear Comics in Laguna Hills, in what I would say is arguably the top comic book shop in all of Southern California. And we're here with the owner and proprietor, Mr. Kenny Jacobs. Kenny, I have one question for you to start off. I know this is a vlog about remembering stuff. How is it that you remember everybody's names who go into this store? I've been here a handful of times, and I don't expect you to remember my name at all, but you remember everybody's names. How do you do that?
It's part of being in retail, I guess. I honestly, I just think that if I see someone on a regular basis, if they come in twice a month, I should know their name.
Okay, so you just have a knack for it. You just have a talent.
I don't know. I really, honestly, you should know if your customers are coming in regularly enough to where you see them twice a month or
Right.
more. You should
know their name.
You should know their name.
So there you have
That's
it.
kind of, and it's not a knack. It's just that you should know their name.
All right.
They're giving you money, so you should know.
So Kenny, you're saying if as a business owner, it's just your responsibility to know everybody's names if they walk in twice a month, at least.
I kind of think so.
So it's not a special talent that you have.
No.
It's not. You just have.
No, I mean, I guess people have accused me of remembering personal things about them for years and years. So maybe it's just remembering is a good. If it's talent, then remembering is a talent, I guess.
I think you have a certain talent. I think it's a special talent that you
Because
have.
there's just you talk to people, you see them, and I think if you are talking to people about comics or life in general, you're going to remember little things about them. And I don't know, if, like I said, if I don't think I'd be as good at doing what I do if I didn't take the time to know someone's name who I see on a regular basis.
That's true.
That's the bare minimum.
Right.
Is knowing a name.
Exactly.
Like knowing more about them, more like what they like, what they're into, what they might like. I mean, that's going beyond the name.
Okay.
So, and that's what we do.
So that's the bare minimum for you, remembering.
I kind of think so.
Okay, because it amazes me. He knows everybody's names. Anyone who walks into this door, he knows their name. So again, we're here in Nuclear Comics in Laguna Hills, arguably the top comic book store here in Southern California. I wouldn't even say Orange County. I would say in Southern California. For me, this is the best. So Kenny, mind you guys, Nuclear Comics, or Kenny, has been in business for 25 years. He's celebrating
25 in December.
He's celebrating his 25th year this December. Kenny, back in 1994, when it also exploded in the Philippines, how was the comic book scene here in California? How do you remember it? Was it the same? I mean, did it also get extra popular during that day, or was it just...
It was in decline in 94.
Oh, is that the case?
But at 24, I didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went in in a declining time period.
Oh, wow. Why is that? Why was the
because
business in decline now?
There was a boom.
Okay.
And then there was a bust.
All right.
And in the late 80s and early 90s was a boom, and then the mid 90s there was a bit of a bust.
Okay.
And so I came in at a downtime, which was good because that means I only had one way to go.
There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I had more ways to go.
And as I was saying earlier, right around that time was when Image Comics started out.
Yeah.
What do you remember from that time? What was the feeling like when all of these artists broke out from Marvel and put out their own titles?
As a fan, I hated it, but then as a retailer, I didn't hate it, but at the same time, most of the comics weren't really that good.
Back then?
No, they weren't really that good.
Okay. What were some of the titles that you remember from Image Comics back then?
I read one issue of Spawn ever.
Okay.
I read the first one and I never read beyond it.
Okay.
I read probably a couple issues of Wildcats.
With Jim Lee. That was Jim Lee's title,
Chris
right?
Claremont, Jim Lee. I mean, I only bought like one or two issues of everything, and then I didn't read anything because nothing. Either they didn't come out on time, which was the case.
Oh, okay. So they weren't like Clockwork.
Oh no,
Oh,
because
okay.
they had no editors at the like the upstart indie company. They had no editors, so nothing ever came out on time.
Got it.
Then so they were very infrequent, and they just weren't that great. And then it's not. I mean, Marvel and DC's comics weren't that great either, but there were good comics on the shelves, and there were things that were exceptional at the time.
Okay.
It's just that the majority of Image stuff was less than exceptional.
But were they flying off the shelves? Do you remember if people were buying them?
I didn't start the business, so 94 was a little bit after the Image craze.
Right.
Most of the stuff had already been out for
a while.
For a little bit.
Okay.
So I missed that craze where everything, didn't matter what it was, sold.
Right.
But certain things still sold. Spawn still sold, and certain books, I don't remember exactly what was on the shelf.
Okay.
I remember Stormwatch was kind of worthless until Warren Ellis took it over. And
I remember Stormwatch, yeah.
Well, when Warren Ellis took it over in late 90s, it was amazing.
Okay.
It was one of the best superhero books of a decade.
I remember during this decade, I would say the 90s also, was when Superman died and Batman broke his back.
Yeah.
Or Bane broke Batman's back.
Sure.
What was the sentiment during that time for, all these big superheroes?
During
with all these
those
things
phases, I still was just a fan reader, and I didn't have the store yet.
Okay.
So again, I missed those crazy things.
Oh, okay.
As a retailer, I missed those. Just by a couple years, but I still missed them. So, they didn't really... Okay, so the big, huge thing that happened when I was in my first year in business was Age of Apocalypse.
Okay, all right.
They canceled all the X-Men titles, and then for 4 months they had this new Age of Apocalypse universe, and that was huge.
Okay.
That was huge.
So that was the big thing.
And I actually thought for a long time it held up as a really great crossover.
Okay.
Crossover / event.
All right.
It was really good.
Okay.
Some of the books don't hold up that great over time, but the gist of it I actually still think holds up pretty well.
Kenny, quick question for you. What do you think about this whole thing where Marvel put everything in movies? What's your take on that as a comic book proprietor and as a comic book shop owner? What's your take on all of that?
My take is if the movies are good, it's good for business. And
okay.
When they're not good, it's kind of negative.
So you can say that it was good for business.
Took a long time.
Okay.
Took a long time to get there, but yeah, the movies have been good for business, but it took a long time.
Okay. But right now, is it good for
Sure.
in general?
Sure.
Kenny, my last question for you before we say goodbye to everybody. What would you recommend now in terms of graphic novels or comic books that people should check out? Off the top of your head, what would you recommend?
Anything by Jeff Lemire.
Oh, okay. Jeff
Anything
Lemire.
and everything written by Jeff Lemire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything and everything.
Everything.
Wow. So could you just a couple of titles for our audience?
Currently, Black Hammer.
Okay, Black Hammer.
Underwater Welder.
Underwater
a
Welder.
brand new book that just came out this week called Frog Catcher.
Okay. Oh yeah, I saw that in the show.
Roughneck. Sweet Tooth is amazing. A book called a sci-fi love story called Trillium, which is ridiculous.
Okay.
He's the most prolific creator in comics, and everything that dude does is fantastic.
So there you have it. From the expert himself, Mr. Kenny Jacobs. Anything by Jeff Lemire.
Anything and everything by
Jeff
Lemire.
Yeah. All right. Kenny, thanks again for having us here in Nuclear Comics. To everyone who's watching Ricky Remembers, we're here at Nuclear Comics in Laguna Hills, arguably the top comic book store in all of Southern California. Go check it out if you're in the area, or if you're in the neighborhood, or if you know anybody visiting here, or if you have friends and family here in Orange County. Tell them to check out Nuclear Comics and look for Mr. Kenny.
You can follow us on Instagram as well.
Go ahead, Kenny. You want to promote your website?
Nuclear Comics is just Instagram at Nuclear Comics.
Go to Google, search for Nuclear Comics. Go on Facebook and Instagram. They post new stuff was it Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Every Tuesday, because as we said earlier, Wednesday is New Comics Day, and that's when all the new comics come out. So watch out for Nuclear Comics posts on Facebook and Instagram and their website. This has been Ricky Remembers. Please, if you have any questions or any comments, just drop them in the comment section below. And please don't forget to like and to click on subscribe, especially the notification bell. And tune in again for our next episode here in Ricky Remembers. Thank you. Thanks, Kenny.
Sure.